One of the most celebrated and famous soldiers and members of court from the Tudor period was Sir Walter Raleigh. He was an explorer, writer, spy, politician, courtier, and a very prominent figure in Elizabethan society. Raleigh is famous for many things, such as making tobacco popular in England, and also as a man who set up the first English colonies in North America, being given a royal patent to explore Virginia, naming it after the Virgin Queen Elizabeth I. Although his colonies failed, with the mission to Roanoke Island today being a subject of still some debate, there is much doubt that he was a favourite of Elizabeth I. No matter how influential and important Raleigh was during the latter Tudor period, he was also a man who met a large amount of trouble in his life, and he would pay the ultimate price, being brutally executed during the reign of King James I. So join us today as we look at the downfall and execution of Sir Walter Raleigh, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Sir Walter Raleigh was born into a well-connected family around 1552. His family was very Protestant, and during the reign of Bloody Mary I, they had a number of close encounters with the Queen as she restored England to Catholicism. In one of these, his father had to hide inside a tower to avoid execution, and through this Walter developed a hatred of Roman Catholicism that developed throughout his childhood. He left for France in 1569 to serve in French civil wars, and later studied at Oxford University in 1573. He did leave, however, without a degree, finishing his education in the Inns of Court, but he would later admit to have never studied law, so we don't completely know what he was doing throughout the early 1570s, but he did claim to be present at French battles before returning to England around 1575. It was Raleigh's actions in Ireland in which he would become known to Elizabeth I. He took part in the suppression of the Desmond rebellions and was present at a siege where he led a group of soldiers that executed around 600 Spanish and Italian soldiers. Through his exploits in Ireland, he received vast amounts of land and gained much territory, making him a very rich man. His continued service in Ireland led to him being further rewarded with many estates, and his good work captured the Queen's eye. She rewarded Raleigh, and for his work he became a favourite. He was invited to court and made an excellent impression on the Queen, being a very gallant and handsome gentleman. Allegedly once, when he was walking with the Queen, he apparently spread his cloak across a puddle so that the Queen could walk over it. Raleigh today is best known for his attempts at colonising and exploring parts of the world in an attempt to claim them for England and the Queen. Elizabeth in 1584 granted him a royal charter, giving him authority to explore and colonise and rule over any remote, heathen and barbarous land, and countries that were not possessed by any Christian king or inhabited by Christians. The charter gave Raleigh 7 years to set up a settlement, or lose the right to do so, with someone else then being given a chance. Raleigh and Elizabeth intended that these explorations would provide the Queen with vast riches from unexplored territories, and that bases would be established to allow the English to attack and raid Spanish ships. The Spanish at the time were great enemies of the English, and these colonies could have allowed attacks on the enemy. Raleigh never visited North America himself, however led expeditions later there, sending others to try and set up a colony on Roanoke Island, but these would later become known as the Lost Colony. The expeditions were funded mostly by Raleigh and his friends, and they never succeeded in providing revenue to maintain the colonies. His attempts to create colonies never really hit the expectations that were dreamed of when the voyages were planned. Raleigh himself remained a prominent member of the Queen's court, being knighted in 1585 and being given a number of titles, but also becoming a member of Parliament. He commissioned a ship to be built, and this would be one of the most famous vessels in English history. Originally the ship was to be named the Ark Raleigh, however the Crown later purchased the ship from him for a sum today of well over £1 million, and the ship would later be renamed the Ark Royal. The Ark Royal would become a pivotal vessel which served in a number of campaigns against the Spanish Armada, being one of the largest ships of these engagements. It was also used in raids on Cadiz and was a great servant to the Royal Navy. Raleigh himself was involved in defending England against the Spanish, and his luck with the Queen continued into the 1590s. He was given further rewards by the Queen in 1592, such as being gifted Durham House in the Strand and further estates in Dorset. He also became the captain of the Yeomen of the Guard. However, Walter Raleigh had done something that would come to cause great distress to the Queen. Elizabeth was very generous towards her favourites, however she demanded complete trust and loyalty back, including from Raleigh. But he caused the Queen great offence. In 1591, he had married in secret Elizabeth Bess Throckmorton. She was one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting and was pregnant and 11 years younger than Raleigh at the time. The couple were then married in secret, with their son being born in around March 1592. Their child would pass away a year later after contracting the plague, but the outrage from the Queen with regards to the whole matter would be profound. Elizabeth found out about their marriage and child in around May 1592 and became furious. She ordered some of the most severe punishment, with Raleigh being sent to the Tower of London along with Bess, and Bess was also dismissed from court. Walter was later released after a few months, but was banished from court for 5 years, and Elizabeth felt completely betrayed. In an attempt to win back the Queen's affections, Raleigh continued with his explorations and began to become obsessed with the mythical land of riches known as El Dorado. He had become convinced of its existence and had heard of the famous city being covered in gold in South America. He ventured to Guyana and may have stumbled across some gold mines there, but suffered from a lack of support for colonising the area. In 1595, he also took part in the capture of Cadiz, and he was wounded, but he did continue to serve in the defence of England against the Spanish Armada and was relatively successful. Sir Walter Raleigh through this did regain some royal favour with Queen Elizabeth, and he returned to court in 1597. Up until Elizabeth's death, he remained in her good books, but following the death of the Queen, his good luck would run out. On the 25th of March 1603, Elizabeth died, and it was shortly after this that he would find himself thrown inside the Tower of London once again, having been charged with treason for his involvement in the main plot to remove Elizabeth's successor James I from the throne and to replace him with Lady Arabella Stuart. His trial began in November 1603, and he conducted his own defence. Raleigh argued that the evidence against him was not concrete and was just hearsay, but he was convicted by James I, but he decided to spare him his life. Whilst he was imprisoned at the Tower of London, he wrote his book The History of the World, and he wrote of many stories of the ancient world. Raleigh remained inside the Tower of London until 1616, but was given some luxuries inside his cell. He even, during his imprisonment, was able to grow exotic plants and brew his own herbal medicines. In 1617, following being pardoned by the king, he was given permission to conduct a second expedition to search for El Dorado. During the expedition, a group of soldiers under the command of one of Raleigh's friends attacked a Spanish outpost, and this violated peace treaties with Spain, causing huge escalations of tensions. One of the conditions of the pardon given by James I was that Raleigh was not to engage in any hostilities with the Spanish in any sense, and this included against their colonies and also their shipping. During the attack on the settlement, Raleigh's son was shot and killed. James was keen to improve relations with the Spanish, and despite being a Protestant, he wanted to improve the hostilities towards the two countries. Raleigh though was still ingrained with this hatred of the Catholics, and still had this strong opposition to Spanish expansion in South America and in the world. When Raleigh returned to England, a furious Count Gondomar, the Spanish ambassador, demanded that strict punishment be instated onto Raleigh, with a demand for his death sentence and execution to be reinstated by King James. James I, a man who was not as open to charm as Queen Elizabeth was, decided to carry out the execution of Walter Raleigh and to throw him back into prison to await his death. He had been accused of deliberately inciting war between England and Spain, and the king, desperate to improve relations, had no choice but to agree with the Spanish. On the 29th of October 1618, Sir Walter Raleigh was led from the Tower of London to the Palace of Westminster, close to Westminster Abbey, at around 8 o'clock by an escort of armed pikemen. He dressed in an all-black nightgown and wore mostly black as he approached his place of execution. The crowd that day was absolutely huge. The escort had to push their way through the people towards Old Palace Yard, and a scaffold had been erected in the night for the execution. The night before, he had been visited by the Dean of Westminster, and he confessed that justice had been done and by the course of law that he must die. Walter Raleigh had requested that the execution would take place in public so that he could make a short speech to the people, and this was agreed, but the authorities were concerned about what his words would do. The day of the execution was chosen to coincide with the Lord Mayor's pageant, and it was believed that this would attract the majority of the crowds away from Westminster, but Raleigh had a huge audience for his final moments. Many noblemen sat on their horses to get a better view. Some people stood at windows or on balconies to get a glimpse of Walter Raleigh's last minutes. He was led to the scaffold by 2 sheriffs of London and the Dean of Westminster, and then he addressed the crowd. He said, "I was yesterday taken out of my bed in a strong fit of fever, which hath much weakened me, and whose untimeliness forbearing no occasion nor place, I likewise expect today. I do therefore first desire the Almighty God to keep sickness from me, that I may have time to deliver my mind." He realised then that many people were having trouble hearing him, and he began to thank God, saying, "He hath brought me into the light to die before the eyes of so many honourable and worthy personages, and that he hath not suffered me to die in obscurity in the dark prison of the Tower, where for the space of 14 years together I have been oppressed with many miseries, and have suffered much affliction and sickness." Raleigh's speech lasted around 25 minutes, and he professed his loyalty to the king and also his country. He was asked by the sheriff even at one point if he wanted to come off the scaffold during his address and stand by a fire to get warm before continuing. He refused, saying, "No good, Mr. Sheriff, letters dispatched for within this quarter of an hour mine adieu would come upon me, and if I not be dead before then, mine enemies will say that I quake in fear." He then held a prayer with the crowd and said, "I have been a seafaring man, a soldier and courtier, and in the temptations the least of these is enough to overthrow a good mind and a good man." His final words to the nobility who were gathered there were, "I have a long journey to go, therefore I must take my leave of you." The scaffold then cleared, and Raleigh spent some time in prayer before removing his nightgown in preparation for its death. He asked to see the axe which was going to take his life, which was held under the executioner's cloak, and this was shown to him. He said, "This is a sharp medicine, but it is a cure for all diseases." The executioner received his forgiveness from the condemned, as was traditional at the time, and Raleigh was offered a blindfold, but he refused this. He then stretched himself over the block before his neck was put into place by the executioner, who ripped his shirt and waistcoat with a knife to expose the neck so that nothing would get caught when the axe was swung. Raleigh then signalled with his hands that he was ready to die, but the executioner hesitated in front of the crowd, but Raleigh then cried out, "What dost thou fear? Strike, man, strike." It took 2 blows to sever the head of the famous Tudor explorer, and the lips quivered still once the head was taken off. The executioner then held up Raleigh's head on the scaffold, showing it to the crowd as a warning. Raleigh's head was then placed into a red bag, and his body was wrapped in his velvet nightgown. This was then taken away to a mourning coach drawn by 2 white horses, and as the crowds dispersed, the bloody scaffold still remained. Sir Walter Raleigh's head was then embalmed and given to his wife, with his body being laid to rest in St Margaret's Church in Westminster. His tomb can still be seen today, however the story of his head is a rather interesting and morose one. Raleigh's wife kept it around with her and allegedly carried it around with her for the next 29 years until she died. It was kept in a velvet bag and was then interred at St Margaret's Church. Sir Walter Raleigh was one of the most prominent Tudor explorers and courtiers of Elizabeth I's reign, and his execution was incredibly controversial. Although his popularity was not at the heights it once was, his execution was seen by large amounts of the population as unjust and unnecessary, and as a ploy by James I to establish his power. His brutal and barbaric end was met with a contrast of his final speech, in which he held the crowd in a long address. He was a man of many hats and talents, and today remains one of English history's most interesting and important figures. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.